Well, we're all familiar with the coal loaders out in Wyoming, which are huge, huge in size. And I toured the Big Thunder Mine out there on a convention, and their coal seam was 50 feet thick, and it had to be drilled and dynamited in order to be loaded with front end loaders. So there's no way we can model that type of thing on a model railroad. So I want to go to things that can be modeled on your layout. When I was giving this for the very first time for Martin Lofton, he published a clinic list of who was going to give what clinics. And I got a phone call from a fellow, and he says, "What's a strip mine?" And I thought, well, you know, maybe that's not such a bad question. Maybe I should address that. So I called the Bureau of Mines up in McAlester, Oklahoma, and asked if there was any mines still being stripped. And the sweet lady up there said, yes, they are working over at Stigler, Oklahoma. And she gave me the phone number of the foreman here, and I called him and told him what I wanted to do, and he invited me over. So we're going to have a half a dozen pictures here of this stripper, and these were taken in October of '02. So this mine had just gotten started. There is another mine over by Stigler, which they were finishing up and moving everything over to here. You'll notice the size of this bucket and the size of these trucks. You can put two of these trucks in this bucket side by side. And by the looks here, it looks like there's probably 20 feet of overburden maybe, which is quite economical to remove. And then looking at this dump truck, and these dump trucks, of course, have got big bodies on them, and unless they're 18-wheelers. This coal seam probably is somewhere in the neighborhood, I'd guess what, maybe 6 feet thick, 7 feet thick, which makes it very economical to mine. And you can see they're just getting started here. And they have leased several hundred acres, and they claim that this particular strip mine, which the foreman said would be the last one in Oklahoma, there will be 5 years of stripping in this particular area. When the coal comes up with the dump trucks, it comes up and dumps into this bin, which goes down through the crusher. And we'll see more pictures of that type of thing. Comes up the conveyor into the pile. And then they load it into this 18-wheeler. Now, all of the coal being mined here is what you would call steam coal. It's about 1/4 of an inch. And all of this was being trucked east about 20 miles to the power plant at Hebner, Oklahoma. This is the mine that they were just finishing up on the east side of Hebner. And they're still doing a little bit of digging here, but they're basically wrapping this up, and you'll see. The overburden here is very thick, and it's becoming very uneconomical to continue in this area. The area to the right out of the picture is a very large, flat, reclaimed area where they had been mining. This is looking down into the pit, so you can see the amount of overburden here that is being removed. And the coal seam now is down at this level. And these are augers, which they couple together And you can see 3 holes here. They go underneath this overburden by whatever the length of these are. They look like they're about 20 feet long. So they're bringing coal out of there, and then that's being brought up and dumped into trucks. This is really a lot of overburden. Let's see, I want to go back a slide. How do I do that, Bragg? How do I go back a slide?
Just go to the left of the screen and look for those arrows. You might have to click to get rid of that menu first. There you go. The one to the left. Go to your left a little. There you go.
This slide was out of order, and I tried to get it reversed, and the place that I had this made are out of business, so I lost out on that. This is the top of the bin on the south side of Heavener, where the coal is dumped in, goes down through the grates. Up here is the bin, comes down through the crusher, which is back here in the shadow, comes up the conveyor belt. Now, this has a crusher. Well, so did the previous pictures. And these are on wheels that can be moved back and forth if there are no cars here to load. These were KCS 100-ton hoppers that they were putting the finishing touches on from that particular mine. But this would be very easy to model. Now, the thing that I want to stress in this whole clinic is the movement of a lot of cars utilizing a very small footprint. If you look at, you know, the model railroader and Craftsman and so forth, you'll see this little building, which is smaller than a 40-foot boxcar, but there's a boxcar sitting at that building. There's no way that building can load or unload a boxcar. But with a coal loader, you can unload any and move during an operating session as many coal cars as you want. You know, I'm model 1954, so my coal cars are almost all 2- and 3-bay hoppers. Now we're going to jet back up, clear back to 1977. And a fair number of these pictures now were taken in the 70s, and what you're going to see no longer exists. This is a loading platform, and you'll notice it's not very high. This is a 12-inch white piece of wood I put on here, and I use that for a scale if I wanted to scale this. And you can see the counterweighted portion of the platform and the cross beam up here at the top, and the truck would back up, and when the back wheels got on this portion of the ramp, it would go down flat, and the back wheels would go up against the stop, and they were loading Rock Island gondolas. Rock Island had a tremendous number of gondolas, and gondolas are very popular in the Midwest versus hopper cars. So this would only take up a few inches, actually can be placed off of the road. You can load however many cars here that you would want in an operating session. And it would be very, very prototypical. This coal, which was also steam coal, was being crushed at the pit. So there's no crusher involved in this structure or any conveyor belts. It comes ready to dump. Here's a top view where they put the steel plates out on here and the backboard for the dual wheels. This is a neat little structure. And again, that's my 12-inch ruler. This is at Knoxville, Iowa. I took these pictures in July of 1977. And you can note the no clearance sign here.
Okay, Lloyd, can I ask a question?
Yes,
Oops. Evidently, the parking bumper did not work there, did it?
the parking bumper worked here. The trucker was a little overzealous in his speed, and his back set of wheels jumped the bumper. But you notice the difference. This is still wood cribbing, but notice the difference in the height to be able to load twin hopper cars. So this is doing the same thing as the previous picture, only it's higher for hoppers. That's obviously a shot out of a magazine.
That's a heart-thumping experience.
Oh, man. Now we're going to go to Porham, Oklahoma. This is my favorite out of the pictures. 18-wheelers were coming in here, and rather than tandem trucks that you have previously seen. And I do not know where they were coming from, but I do know that going up north on Interstate 69, I passed an area one day that was probably 20, 30 acres right along the highway that was being stripped with a drag, just a regular standard drag line. And the next time I went up the highway, it had all been leveled off and it was a pasture. So the strip mines can be very small. And this truck is probably coming from one, maybe even two of those smaller strip areas, bringing it over, dumping. And from there, the front end loader puts it into the bin. And you'll notice these are 100-ton Missouri Pacific cars. And we have a man up here that is controlling a puller that is moving these cars along. And there were something like 5 or 6 cars in a row here. And I believe he told me they were at the time they were loading 3 cars a day. Little closer view of the crusher. This coal was coming in uncrushed from the pit down through the crusher control house, which I thought was pretty slick, easy to build. And here they're waiting for another truck, and this foreman is greasing some items on this conveyor. The crusher, of course, is over here. Can be done. This can all be very nicely and easily built from styrene going up the conveyor. This is a look inside the control house, which basically is just keeping the rain off of the breaker boxes and the on-off buttons. There's a little walkway across the belt at this point to get to it. It's another shot looking up the conveyor. This is the towing motor that is pulling these cars along. And you'll also notice that almost all of this has been built out of scrap steel out of a junkyard. And you're going to see a lot of that. This is just all a bucket of rust, waterproof motor, gear train, and so forth, pulling the cable. This is looking up now as it's going into the second hopper. Notice now the heap on this hopper. Does that look like anything you've seen commercially available in HO gauge? You'll see one or maybe two humps of coal, and that's not how they're loaded. This might be a little bit on the extreme, the number of humps, just because of the way the car was being moved. A flood loader, that would be flat all the way across the top. And they've got a backstop up here that keeps the coal falling into the center part of the car. This coal was being shipped to a power plant in Kansas City. And this coal is being called steam coal. It is pulverized at the power plant into what you would call almost like talcum powder. And it's burned in suspension, just like a blowtorch, just like an oil-fired locomotive. You open the fire door on an oil-fired locomotive, and you see this big blowtorch because they're atomizing the oil out of the tender. And that's what they do with this coal. They atomize it or pulverize it. It's burned in suspension. And then what falls down to the grate and goes out on a conveyor belt is what they call fly ash. You've heard that word. And that's used in landfills. It's used in cement. There's some uses for it. Here we have the electric motor up here that is powering this particular part of the conveyor, and you'll notice everything is rust, all welded up with a cutting torch and a welder, and you can build one of these. This is looking down from that second car, looking at the coal coming out of the crusher, coming up the conveyor, and this gentleman is controlling the movement of the car. I was surprised he let me get up here because this is all operating, and probably could not do this today. Of course, none of this exists today. Now we're going to move down a little bit further to Kyoto, Oklahoma. And there is an interesting aspect to this one. And as you can see, there were 6 or 8 loaded mop cars, 100-ton cars here, and the heaps are a little bit higher because the car was moved 6 or 8 feet at a time. And so it's more humped. And again, you can see this is all scrap iron. Here's some painted white. And you have the bin. The coal is brought in by truck. If it's been crushed, it goes up this ramp into the car. Now, this is interesting. The stuff that needs to be crushed goes into the bin, down through the small crusher. There's a cat diesel over here that is operating the crusher. This apron now, the front end loader will come around and he'll pick this apron up and he'll bring it out close to the hopper car so that they can back the truck right up to the hopper car and dump it. And that's coal that's already been crushed. And the uncrushed goes through the other conveyor. This operation, of course, we're beginning to increase the size of the real estate. And again, you can see this is all used timbers, freshly cut, bridge timbers or wherever they got them. And this is looking over at the conveyor. They've got a heat pop here to keep warm, I guess. And you can see the flywheel over here. The crusher is in this area, the bin, and comes up the conveyor. This is looking at the base, but the cat diesel over here that is running this crusher underneath. And you can see this is all used iron. It's just been cut, fitted, and welded. This would be one heck of a weathering job. And that's just a shot, another heat pop here to keep warm the crusher. You can see the big flywheel right back here. And the coal coming up. This one now has a way of lowering this belt. You can see the supports and stuff up here, the motor and so forth. They could load gondolas from this particular structure. This belt, this conveyor belt here can be lowered. And we'll see another shot of that. And then of course you got the end of the conveyor here, the chute that they can lower down into the center part of the car. This would be neat stuff to make out of styrene. This would just be a super project that would take up just a few square inches of real estate. Now we're going to get down to Panama, Oklahoma. This is the only, well, this one has been painted, even with that load of coal in it, it's been painted because there's overspray on the coal. But this is basically a little bit larger. You got a much larger bin. All the bin is doing here now is feeding the coal up into this small crusher. Coal comes out of the bottom down this chute and comes up the belt. This would be nicely made out of styrene. They've driven some poles in the ground here, and these are just pieces of wood. Could be used power poles, telephone poles that they have put in to where they can have a truck ramp to dump. This is a view coming up and into the crusher. This can be very easily faked. You know, this is not a high detail part at all. Cut off the end of the piece of tube, put some spokes in it for the flywheel. Time you put some mesh screen across here, it hides a lot. This can just be made out of pieces of styrene. This is looking from the top of the coal pile now, going up, going down into the compressor. Now there's something here that makes this one very, very unique. You notice the track over here and the track over here on the right that was viewed in the last shot. This crusher is built inside a Y. So if you have a Y on your layout, instead of just putting a pile of stuff in there or some trees or grass or whatever, you can put a coal loader in. And the track on the east side was a double track. One track had the coal cars on it, the other track enabled the trains to go on up this line to another loader, which I could not get to. Another view of the crusher, big electric motor. I don't know how many horsepower that would be, but it would be a couple of 100 horsepower probably, or 150 horsepower. I'm surprised this one is painted. They are apparently going to be reusing this. But again, this is a 1978 picture. And you can see the two sets of tracks over here, the east leg of the Y and the coal track. Looking up the conveyor. Now, this is another conveyor. You can see this electric motor. This portion of the conveyor from the crusher up can be lowered down to load gondolas, as well as twin bay or triple bay hoppers. So that's an interesting feature that a couple of the others did not have. And this conveyor belt has been covered, probably to help keep the dust down. Well, I guess it's providing a walkway up, is what it's doing, up to this electric motor. It's got chains that come down to the frame of the conveyor right here to raise and lower it. Can be lowered all the way down to this beam. And again, this was all made out of scrap iron. You can see various things that have been welded on it from the junkyard. Up here at the top, they don't even bother to cut it off. Now we're going to go back to Porham. These are all 1978. This is a fairly large operation. This was a much larger bin, a much larger crusher down here, and they were loading 17 cars a day out of here. And they were all being dumped by 18-wheelers, and then the coal being brought up with a front end loader. The control house. It's hard to see. You can see the funnel here on the bin down into the crusher, which is right in this area. And the operator is watching the operation. All scrap iron. I tried to get a little better view of the crusher, but I really didn't. You can see the big flywheel right here. Well, at least he's air conditioned. And they got floodlights so they can load 24/7. I guess that's how they're getting the amount of coal they need. Yeah, there's the electric motor down here running the crusher. It's this motor. Here's the crusher wheel. I tried to get a little better picture of the crusher. There you can see it right here. Coal coming down and coming up the conveyor belt. That's a huge electric motor. That can be very nicely made out of, well, all of this made out of styrene. This is the belt going up. And you'll notice that the heaps on these cars are a little fewer well, they're not fewer, but they're a little bit shorter in height, which means the gentleman up there in the control house is moving these cars somewhat steadily. This was an interesting feature here in that there is a gate up in this area here that allows the coal to either come down this chute to finish loading this car and can immediately switch over to this chute to begin loading the end of this car without stopping. These cars can continuously move. And you'll notice all this flat land back here, that's all of it, as you can see, pasture. That's all been strip mined and reclaimed. You see cattle over here, duck pond. They do a very nice job of reclaiming the land. But this is where I got my title, Flatland Coal Loaders. This is not Colorado, it's not Appalachia. It's not Kentucky or Western Virginia. You can see the coal now coming out of this particular chute as he's moving this car along. Another light up here for nighttime. And the electric motor up here that is operating the baffle, or if you want to call it a baffle, or the part that shuts off one and turns on the other chute. This is what he was using to pull this string of cars, and you can see a whole string of them down here loaded, waiting to be picked up. This, to me, again, all scrap iron. This looks like the winch off the back of a D8 Caterpillar. Is what that looks like. Or a D8. Where the cable used to go up over the cab down to the front, and the blade used to be lifted with this cable rather than before they went to the hydraulics. And this string of cars went on around the corner. Cable coming through a set of shivs. He's hooked onto the towing hole at the end of this third car here. This would have been the third car. These cars were apparently built in '76. And they're all looking fairly new because I took these photos in '78. So now we're increasing our footprint, not the number of cars particularly, but to load the portion of this that is used to load these cars is getting larger. And they are loading more and more cars. Now we're going to go over to Stigler, Oklahoma. This was a much smaller operation. I believe they were running something like 4 to 5 cars a day here. Even got a porta potty truck. There's no siding to this berm that they have built up here to dump into the chute. Crusher is right down in here. Comes up, dumps, and comes on up into the car. Corrugated iron. I was able to get a shot here now of the coal coming out of the crusher. I'm sorry, it's coming out of not out of the crusher, it's coming out of the bin. It's going to the crusher. And here's a good shot of the crusher. It's almost a block. And again, you've got a big electric motor over here, waterproofed, obviously. It's coming out of the bottom of the crusher onto this belt, which then goes up onto the car. And you, you can see the operator up here in his plywood box. But he's got a window that he can break open. I guess that's to keep him dry if it starts to rain. This is another shot looking up at the bin, electric motor, the crusher down here coming up to the car.
How far away are these from the mine?
I have no idea.
Okay.
They can be close, they can be 20 miles. Depends on where they're stripping.
Sure.
Because these don't move. We'll see one that is portable, however, before we're done. This one would not take very much square inches at all, maybe 8 inches square, maybe. You can put in this on. Now there's another thing. That's just another shot into the crusher. They're loading a car. He was not operating at the time I was standing there. They were waiting for the next truckload. And again, this part of the structure allows this conveyor belt to be raised or lowered for gondolas. And they're really heaping this coal up in this particular car. But he's moving it at a very steady pace because the number of humps up here are not very high. And this looks like a winch off the back of a wrecker maybe, or maybe even off the back of a D8. You got an electric motor inside this box, which apparently is not waterproof because it's got a lid over it. Drive shaft to run this gearbox, and the towing cable going down to some cars. Now, this is interesting. This is looking 100, I just turned 180 degrees so that coal loader is just to the right out of this picture. There's a road that comes across right there. And what do you think they're doing here? There's a boxcar at this coal loader. Toluca Mining Company. You got a bin of coal that has come from the stripper, got a backhoe. He loads that coal into 2 hoppers or 1 hopper. It goes through a separator. There's 2 separators in here, which is taking the fines out of the coal. This then would not be steam coal. It would be very, very clean and sized. What do you think it's used for? And why is there a boxcar? They're bagging forge coal in 50-pound bags for the horseshoe people. And that's what is in this building back here, is where they were loading it into bags, putting it on pallets, forklifting it into that boxcar. So this is a neat little addition and a place to have a boxcar along with your coal cars. More for operation. You can see that that's quite a separator.
It's air powered too, or it's an
Yes.
air separator, like a threshing machine.
It's a centrifugal
Yeah,
type. The dust is then coming down this pipe. You can see the pallets here they're using, and it's coming into this box, into this big bin. What do you think that is being used for? Briquettes, like you use in your barbecue.
I
The
think
barbecue briquettes, of course, are made out of wood.
I think it's a smoker for ribs.
So these briquettes, which also contain a little bit of oil and are considerably larger than what you use in your backyard, they are also delivered by coal companies. I had a neighbor that always bought briquettes. He never bought crushed coal. So there's just a cool operation going on here. Now we're going to go to a little larger one. This is at Nevada, Missouri. And these pictures were taken in 1960. And you can see 2 strings of cars here. There's a string being loaded, Here's a whole spring load. This is 2 tracks. There are 2 down chutes here off of this conveyor to where they can load 2 tracks at a time. That's a nice structure. This would, of course, take more room. I'm sorry, this is out of focus, but these are all 2-bay hoppers in here. Frisco, mop, whatever. And these cars are moved a little bit. They're not moved steadily, as you can see the humps. Now in transit, these humps would settle down a little bit, but they still don't look like the 2 humps that you buy, the plastics. The crusher and the bin is down in this area, comes up the conveyor belt. The trucks are backing up here and dumping their coal. And you can see again now, this coal is coming from this has all been reclaimed in here. They're coming from way back in here down this road. Over here to the right, backing up, I'm standing at the bin, and then they drive back out empty and go back to the mine. Flatland coal loaders. The coal now goes up the conveyor. That's my son in 1960. Dan will get a laugh out of that. You'll remember that. And there's my 12-inch white piece of wood. There is 2 separate crushers in this system. The big one that I've shown you, and then there is another crusher in here, which means that they could load at least 2 sizes of coal out of this mine. This would not necessarily all be steam coal. And this chute allows coal to be loaded into a dump truck. The last time I went to Iowa from Dallas up this highway, you could not see any of this. You couldn't even see where the road went across the railroad track. This is a picture of the short chute. Looks like there's 2 crushers here, probably sizing and crushing 2 different sizes. That one's in sideways, I'm sorry. Shows the bin coming down into this crusher. This had been here for several years. I remember seeing this back, well, before 1960. So they were stripping hundreds of acres. This picture taken a year or 2 later on another trip to Iowa, there was no coal being processed. There were no hoppers on these tracks. It had possibly played out. Got to walk way up here between the cars. tracks went on back to about in here. Probably put 8 or 10 cars on each track. Now we're going to move down to Bakshi, I think it's pronounced, Oklahoma. Again, 1978. This place is brand new. This is all pike stuff type structure. This is not corrugated steel. And it was not operating the day I was there, and there was only 2 cars. So it looks like they were just beginning to set up to begin to operate coal coming in from possibly several areas, because that's an awful lot of money being spent here. So here's a way to get rid of a lot of your detail. If you don't want to do the crusher and all that, you can just have a box building with a conveyor coming out of it. This one is coming up to load cars. This one is going into a storage pile. This one goes into a truck. Now we're moving over to Porter, Oklahoma. This was a brand new facility. Again, this was taken in November of '78, and you can see fresh concrete, fresh dirt, no weeds on it or anything, tandem dump trucks, one after another. Going into the bin, coming down at the bottom, coming up a conveyor into the enclosed crusher, and then up the conveyor belt. And again, it looks like a 24/7 operation. You've got night lights. I found nobody here to talk to, so I don't know how many 100 acres there were about the strip, but it had to be a lot to put this kind of money into it. And these are probably meeting the latest OSHA requirements. All the conveyors are covered. The bin is covered. Dust control. This is also all steam coal. Bottom of the crusher, coal going up the belt, coming down into a huge pile. And this was all being loaded with a front end loader. And this is on the Katy line, and they had shoved a whole string of cars up here. These were all 3 and 4 bay hoppers. And that is one big front end loader. And here's a case where you've got 2 or 3 big piles because it's being loaded. So these cars are not being moved as such. When he gets out of ground over here to the right, I'm sure he went around to the front of that spring and would pull it down. Now we're going to Henrietta, Oklahoma. And again, the last time I was there, it was just, you could see nothing. It was just field. This is looking into the dump bin. And you can see the size of the coal that is coming out of the strip area, and it's being crushed into steam coal. And the thing that was cool about this operation, this crusher, the bin and the crusher and part of the conveyor here is all portable. It was on wheels back here behind this concrete wall. You could hook that up to an 18-wheeler and take it down the road. And look at the size of that dump body. these were big trucks. And even back in the 50s, they were this size. They were big. This is a concrete foundation in here. So the coal was all coming from behind this ridge. And this is on what was at that time the Frisco. And, you know, by the time I got walked around a little bit, here's another truckload ready to dump. And this of course, takes a lot of real estate. Coal coming up to the conveyor, to the storage pile. And these were being loaded. Probably in the next picture, I'm pretty sure you could load. Yeah, it's on wheels. You could actually swing this conveyor around and load cars, and there were about 7 of them here that were loaded, ready to pick up by the Frisco at that time. This coal was also going to Kansas City. And at the end of that pile, there's a big front end loader. He's loading an 18-wheeler to go somewhere else. Yeah, here we go. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 loads, and then there were probably a dozen empties. Now we go to Knoxville, Iowa, 1977, to the Big Bend mine, which operated up into the 80s. This is not a strip mine. This is I threw it in here for comparison. This is a shaft mine that went down. And these are different screen sizes in here to where you could, with the various bins that were under here, you could get 5 different sizes of coal out of this. And you would start with what they would call mine run, which is from powder to big chunks right out of the mine. No crushing. That would go over a screen, which allowed the fines to fall out. So this would be a box of fines, almost like dust. The next one would be 1/4 inch or 3/8, probably steam coal. Then you would go down to golf ball or egg size for home heating, for railroad use. And you'd come on down to the bottom here to where you could get lump. But my dad used to buy mine run because it was the cheapest coal you could buy, because it was not processed in any way. And I can remember our old coal bin down in the basement. He'd be in that coal bin with a huge chisel and a sledgehammer, breaking those big chunks up, because that's the cheapest thing he could buy. This is a scale house where they were weighing trucks that were carrying it out. This building in the back was loaded with the battery packs, the safety helmets, and all that. One whole wall of it, maybe 20 of them in there. This is a crusher. This has been set up now for steam coal. Everything was going through a crusher here and up. And was coming up into this bin, which was loading 18-wheelers here to go to Kansas City. Knoxville was not that far from Kansas City. This would be Knoxville, Iowa. But interesting structures, much larger footprint. All right, that's it.
Very nice. Thank you, Lloyd.
I hope you all got something out of that.
There's a lot of structures that are very modelable.
Yes.
That's a
it
word.
could- And let you move a lot of cars from one of those loaders versus one car from a tiny building.
Right, right. Oh, I had a question, Lloyd, on that one where we had two legs of the Y. Was the idea that you'd bring the coal from the mine on one leg, dump it, and then have it loaded into that same car after it was crushed?
No, it was
No.
coming to that, inside that Y, it was coming in trucks
Okay,
and was dumping into the bend, being crushed. They were just using, some vacant real estate when they built
Yeah.
that,
okay.
which is kind of handy. I mean, if you got a Y on your layout, you might as well use it for loading coal.
Yep.
See, all your coal is off the layout. You don't have to show open pits or strippers or flood loaders or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can just haul out regular 2 and 3 bay 50 and 70 ton cars rather than these 110 car coal trains out of Wyoming.
Yeah.
Rod Thompson here with a question. You showed
Yes.
only one facility that had a scale house and a scale. For those simpler operations, was the volume and reimbursement settled at the destination of the car?
Yes, it was weighed somewhere en route, probably.
Weighing the railroad car?
Right. The railroad car would be weighed on the railroad somewhere between that loader and Kansas City. It could very well have been weighed at Kansas City. The loader in that last couple of pictures there, that was for weighing trucks that were leaving. There was no railroad tracks at the Big Bend mine. They were all gone. Everything was going out in 18-wheelers.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Lloyd. Excellent presentation. And we'll have another meeting next week. We don't have anybody signed up yet to present. So if you're interested, let me know. And otherwise, this one, I'll have the recording put together probably tonight or tomorrow, and we'll get that up online. Appreciate everybody coming, and have a great night.
See you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lloyd. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.